welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, and when I'm not talking on this podcast or writing about nutrition and endurance racing and all kinds of endurance stuff, I'm definitely outside doing one of those things.
And I'm Peter Glassford. I'm an endurance coach and a registered kinesiologist, and you are here on the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we talk to all different types of endurance athletes and people who go outside and do different things, and we try and pull out, things that we can use in our own sports and movements and daily lives.
Yeah, and this was a good, I'd say, consummate athlete-y weekend for us. Last week, I think it was Wednesday afternoon, our good friend Eric, who was actually on the podcast last year talking about getting the FKT for the La Cloche Silhouette Trail in Killarney, and talking all about backpacking and camping, invited us on a weekend-long fast pack in Algonquin Provincial Park, which I'd never been to. So it was an 80-ish kilometer trail, and he was like, we'll leave Friday, we'll be back Sunday. And at first we were like, absolutely not. That seems ridiculous. We can't possibly do that in these next 2 days. And then 5 minutes later, I think I was the one that texted him back, okay, so we're in. Definitely going to do that. And it was so much fun.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, Eric was on, and there's lots of good knowledge in that. It was more to the sort of how do you camp and be outside, I think, was sort of that podcast that we did with him there last year, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll link to that one in the show notes if anyone wants to go back to it. But yeah, the fall colors were in full force this weekend. We saw moose. We saw a lot of moose tracks, some bear poop. Yeah, it was just a really fun kind of adventure that was a little bit different than anything we'd been doing lately. I don't think our hiking packs have really come out since the last time we hiked La Cloche last year.
No, I don't think so. I feel like we did pull one out for some reason recently to haul stuff around, but no, we have not been backpacking. So that was good, and I think perfect for this time of year. A lot of the summer athletes are, sort of maybe through that break. They've taken a break from their sport, hopefully, and now you're sort of getting into that preparation or early base season. And so this is sort of what you want to be doing, just sort of like a little bit of light movement, nothing to excess, hopefully. You're conditioned for 50K runs, so this wasn't so far beyond.
You're right, a 50K pack with a 30-pound backpack on, definitely super chill, very light movement. It was a hard weekend, I'm not gonna lie, but it was really fun, and it was good to get kind of that big change of pace. You're right, it was not outside the norm of like what is a reasonable activity for us to do. It's not like it was like off the couch, let's go hike 20 miles. It was, okay, I've been running more than 20 miles very frequently, so packing shouldn't be that bad. Yeah,
and really just getting ready for sort of, maybe inclement weather, or maybe if you are doing some cross training, if you're thinking skiing, or you're thinking, whatever type of things, or maybe you're looking for something, I always say, just going for a walk often solves a lot of problems. So, even if you're in a city, just starting out and going for a walk, and then you can maybe make that longer or hillier or faster, a little bit of speed walking, or going to some sort of, backcountry hiking day, even a day hike, right, and on the weekend. So keep that in mind. It's quite enjoyable, and you can do it with friends of sort of all different abilities, and yeah.
Yeah. I think we kind of joked around about not really having like all the right winter gear or any of that stuff to go into it. But honestly, it turns out if you do, any kind of endurance sport and you do it through the winter, you probably have enough gear to handle an overnight backpacking trip.
Yeah, I think sometimes we stress over having that perfect thing, right? But I think backpacking, if any sport, is sort of open to not looking super fashionable, right? There's, all different types are accepted, right? It's certainly not... You don't need to be super out there with anything, right? It could be, your winter cross-country ski tights, or it could be, it could be track pants. It could be, really just looking for like a khaki type outdoorsy pant, right? So,
I just wore tights. That was great.
As far as bottom layer, but yeah, we all have winter coats. We all have, and certainly if you're not going super deep and into the wilderness, it doesn't matter that much, right? You have some sort of outdoors type clothing, your cycling kit or whatever, jackets and stuff like this. Your raincoat is probably a great raincoat.
Yeah, I felt like I got really hung up on gear, and that was part of why I initially said no, and then I kind of thought through it, and I was like, oh, you know what, we have packs, like, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think, again, everyone's tolerance, both in terms of their body and their energy and gear and exposure and stuff, is going to be different, right? So there's no reason you can't go to your local, provincial or state park and jump out and go for a 5-10K walk, and you're really just walking, right? So, for a lot of us, that's going to really push tissue as far as, different muscles being used and different ranges of motion. And yeah, and you'll find out your boots might not work or your shoes might not work for that. And maybe it's just adaptation, or you need to look into the equipment. But I generally like people to try stuff out with what they have first, and then figure out sort of where those weaker links are, right? And versus, I know you're very much the get all the gear before you start the activity. But
since I was like 10 years old, yep. And actually, to that end, if anyone wants kind of some tips on how to put together your fall hiking gear without actually buying anything new, I'm doing a couple articles over on the Outdoor Edit this week, so you can go over there and just kind of keep an eye out. So that's theoutdooredit.com. Yeah, so today's guest actually I think would have highly approved of our weekend, I'm gonna say, since we did have a dog with us.
We did.
Yeah, so those of you who are into running, the name Chris McDougall would not be, particularly surprising to you. He's the author of Born to Run and Natural Born Heroes, one of my all-time favorite authors for sure. And he has a new book coming out actually next week, October 15th. It's going to be available, but you can get it for pre-order now. It's called Running with Sherman, and it's all about donkey racing, but there's a lot...
Burro racing. But it's with donkeys. Yeah.
With donkeys. But there's
I guess maybe... Is it with burros, technically?
I don't
know if we get to the bottom of that, but it's called burro racing, and it's essentially donkeys are used.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a burro and a donkey are the same thing.
Okay.
Apologies to the burro/donkey community if I have that
wrong.
They're
welcome to come on and tell us more specifics about the discipline.
Yeah, I mean, the book, I'll say... So I got a copy and read it ahead of its publication date, and I'll say, it's not just for burro racers. It's definitely something that everyone can read. It's a lot about, just sort of our relationship with animals and how we've kind of gone away from that, but how to sort of get back to it and how they can help with, so many different things. I mean, if you've liked Born to Run or Natural Born Heroes, you're going to love this book, even if you're like, I would never race a donkey. Although I'm definitely going to race a donkey.
And a lot of people, like Born to Run, did tremendously well, right? A lot of people who never ran before and didn't run after. Some people got motivated to try because of it. But certainly it appealed to a pretty broad audience.
Yeah, it's funny. I always joke, I'm super impressionable when it comes to reading. I mean, I read Babysitter's Club as a kid, and I babysat. I read Born to Run, and I signed up for a trail marathon the next weekend. Not signed up for one the next weekend, meaning signed up for one that was a year later, signed up for one the next weekend.
Right. Because
I was so excited by reading it. Not an advisable idea, but still really, really fun. So I think it's a really fun episode. We get into if I need a donkey or if I need a dog. I think Chris is another one with the vote firmly in the Molly gets a dog in 2020 category.
Right.
So that means I love this episode. I think most people will. And definitely, check out, pre-order Running with Sherman. It's an awesome book and a great read. All right, let's dive in. Enjoy this episode with Chris McDougall. Chris McDougall, you've written, some of the greatest books on running and adventuring that I've ever read, and I think most people have read. You made me run a trail marathon. I'm going to say it's your fault that I'm an ultra runner now. So, very excited about this. We have not yet bought a miniature donkey now that I've finished reading your new book. Let's start with actually, what have you been up to in the last year? Because the donkey racing had happened, obviously you wrote the book, or you raced and then you wrote the book, and now you've had kind of some time to, muse on it. So what's been going on?
Yeah, it's weird. Once you get down that rabbit hole, same way you did, once you got into trail running, there's no turning back.
Yep.
And with me, it was with the donkeys. Once we started running with the donkeys, you can't stop for basically two reasons. One is because they don't want to stop. They're literally, as we're talking, and I'm looking at them, they're standing at the gate, all three of them, standing at the gate, looking at me like, dude, I see you. It's time to run. So once they realize that's their playtime, they're down. They're down for it every day. And also for me, it really profoundly changed my approach to running. And I wonder if it's not similar to what you experienced when you got on the trails, that there's a different experience when you have another sensation going on when you're getting outside of your own preoccupations. Like when you're on the trail, if you're not paying attention, at some point you're eating dirt. You know, you're making a mistake. And that's the thing about the trail, which is so cool, is it forces you to get outside. You're not thinking about your watch and your heart rate and your Strava and the chores back home and the emails you didn't answer. You're like keeping your eye on your footing and the trail and the hash marks and what's going on. And with donkeys, it's that times 100, because if your attention strays when you're running with your donkey, at some point, he's jerking the rope out of your hand or going the wrong way or something. So that's the thing about it, is it becomes a completely absorbing experience that you keep wanting to repeat.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you been racing, or have you just been running with the donkeys on a regular basis?
Yeah, just running. And we're the problem with the racing is that it takes place about 4,000 miles from home.
Right.
And and that's I don't know. I'm really torn about that, because the races are a trip and they're actually getting bigger all the time. So there used to be only like 2 or 3 in Colorado. Now there's like 10 different races, and a whole new breed of runners has emerged, which is just so cool, that so many people who didn't think they were runners or didn't think they could handle donkeys, they're all getting into barrel racing. Mm-hmm. And now I've become like a total like donkey racing nerd, where I'll get a phone call from a friend all excited, like, oh, you won't believe, Amber Wand finished like 3rd in Leadville in the short course race, and Roger Pedretti's cousin from Jersey, and I'm like totally into this. Like, I'm like, there's like baseball dudes who are covering stats and all the new runners and what they're doing on the trails. Like, I can't get enough of it. The only problem is that the ass ache of hauling 3 donkeys from Pennsylvania to Colorado, and then from town to town, and then back to Pennsylvania, is just, it's more than I want to bite off any particular summer.
I mean, that just sort of sounds like you need to put together a donkey race in Pennsylvania.
It's not out of the question. It's actually, as we speak, at this very moment, one of my Amish neighbors is rolling down the road in front of me on a scooter, and I think that it's a better than 50% chance that I could set up a whole donkey racing series out here with Amish runners.
If you set it up, I will rent a donkey and come out and run that, for sure.
No rental necessary, Molly. You have open privileges. You can get any one of these 3 ding-dongs anytime you want.
Amazing.
All yours.
Yes, count me in, 100%. One of these days, I'm gonna get out there, and I really want to try this whole donkey running thing. After reading the book, I was very skeptical of it in the first few chapters. I'm not gonna lie, but then by the end, I love it. Okay.
I love the fact that you come out voicing your doubts right from the get go.
Yeah. I was just like, donkey racing, whatever. I mean, I felt the same thing honestly when I read Natural Born Heroes. I was like, parkour, whatever, and then next thing I know, I ended up going to the same parkour guy that you went to, and the rest is history. So yeah, it's only a matter of time before we own donkeys. Poor Peter. Peter's like, I just barely said yes to maybe getting a dog, and now you want a donkey? So.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to make this argument that anything you think you're getting from a dog, you actually get from a donkey. Or at least, think about it. They don't bark. They don't really. Well, maybe I should change it to goat. More like goat than donkey. I was gonna say they don't bite. Well, they kind of do bite. They do kind of bray. Goat. The goat's what you're looking for. You make that your starter animal.
Well, Peter, I think Peter, you'd be okay with goats, because then we could host goat yoga. So really, they'd be economically a much friendlier choice. And do our yard if we get a yard.
I guess.
Hey, Peter.
Hello. Yeah. I guess in line with that, I guess what I'm thinking here is we started down earlier, you guys, when you were talking before we started recording, but the idea of the city to country, right? And we're seeing this, like, people are leaving the city and bucking their Wall Street jobs and stuff to go to farm, and you're sort of expressing you're on the other side of that, perhaps. What's your, having done a bunch of this now with the farming and the donkeys and stuff, like, what's your take, I guess, on this? Like, we're all leaving the city and we're all going to start farming, but then, you mentioned the chores and so forth.
Yeah, the tours are all right. It's a funny thing. It's been now almost 20 years for us. So, maybe it's a natural evolution where, there's come to, sort of a finish line where, like, all right, I've lifted enough hay, I've cut enough firewood, this is good. But up until right now, for the majority of the time, I actually really looked forward to them. It was the thing that got me out the door in a way that a regular workout never would. Mm-hmm. I actually look forward to it. So, if I'm inside working at my desk and I'm getting restless, I couldn't wait to run outside and, grab the lumberjack saw and start cutting wood, splitting it and stacking it. And even in the wintertime, you look outside, it's like gray, and, it's like that Pennsylvania, like, iron gray sky that just kind of locks in from February to March. And you have no daylight because, the sun's down at 4:35. But if the donkeys need water, like, all right, man, I'm strapping on the snowshoes, I'm grabbing the 5-gallon buckets, I'm walking down to the creek, I'm hauling buckets of water. Like, I used to get kind of psyched about that. So, I don't know. I had a friend come out from Philly, friend from my Philly days came out, and, she was doing the whole, like, well, maybe it's good for you, but it's not good for everybody. And, I'll have the privilege of, living in the country. I'm like, well, dude, no rain of gold dropped down from the sky for me either. You make your choices and you go with it. And so for the first 10 or so years we were here, it was some tough scratching. It was hard making ends meet and adjusting financially to a country move. But I don't know if it's one size fits all at all. But if you can make the move, man, I think the benefits are just off the charts.
It's funny, we go back and forth on it so often because with cities you get, obviously country living has a sense of community, but in a city you could find pretty much anything that you possibly wanted, as far as, like, you want to pick up soccer game, you want to go play basketball, you want to find, like, random trail runners, you want to find a road cycling crew, you can just find all of them really easy access in the city. And then, you go out to the country and, like, I'm an introvert by nature, so I would very easily, I think, go weeks without seeing people if we moved to where people weren't.
I have to tell you, I'm the same way, and the only worry I have is that doesn't bother me. So, and that's why, so to answer more specifically, you can kind of find what you want here, too. So, and I think I'm about as extreme as it gets. We literally are surrounded by Amish farmers. My nearest neighbors, actually I can't see anywhere. There's no house within eye shot of where we live. My nearest neighbors in every direction are Amish or Mennonite farmers, and yet there's a really vibrant trail running scene out here. The cycling is crazy good because you can go miles and miles, without seeing a car go by. And I don't know, man. I think that the stuff that everyone thinks they're getting from a city is kind of overrated because it was all, we had the restaurants and the museums. Like, when was the last time anybody went to a museum? Nobody goes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And the theater, like, yeah, sure, you go to the theater. And then even restaurants, don't you tend to go to the same, like, maybe 3 places over and over again? Like, when have you strayed outside your, like, triangle of familiar restaurants?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you could just get them to freeze order a bunch of takeout and just freeze it once every few months so you have it for emergencies.
or dude, no, you just cook for yourself. But, that's what you end up doing. So it was a big old jump for us. We came here out of Philly. I lived in cities without exception my entire life. I've never been further than a few miles from at least like 1 million people, and it was. A step off the high dive for us, but I don't know. At this moment, I'm sitting on the porch in the sun. I'm watching the geese walk up the hill toward the gate. The donkeys are below. I don't know, man. It's kind of a nonstop vacation.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, you wrote a bunch about this in the new book, and I felt like this book in particular, compared to your other ones, has a lot more personal narrative about your life and, where you've come from and where you are now compared to the other two. Was that on purpose? Did you decide to do that, or did it just kind of naturally happen when you were writing it?
I'm actually really glad you asked that question because it's kind of a writerly question, it's kind of like shop talk that I like to have, but don't get an opportunity to have. So, it's true. So, because I think most people just they read the book and they're taking in what's happening, and they're not really sort of questioning the mechanics behind it. But for me, that was a really big shift and not an easy one. I came out of a hard news writing background. I was a correspondent for the Associated Press, and you're writing short, hard news briefs, like 500 words of, economic changes in Portugal or, Prime Minister's State of the Union address. And to shift over to more personal writing wasn't easy. So in Born to Run, when I turned in the first draft, one of the first comments my editor made was, like, yeah, there needs to be more of you in this. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I think there need to be less of me. You got Jen Shelton, like, hurling chunks in my bathtub, and, Billy Bonehead doing his stuff, and you got Caballo Blanco. I am hands down like the least interesting person in this story. And my editor said, that's the reason why you need to be present, because you're the point of entry for the average reader. Mm-hmm. They're not extreme people like the other characters. They need someone relatable. I heard it, and I made adjustments to Born to Run, which you see in the final version. And in Natural Born Heroes, we had the same conversation. And he's like, man, needs to be more of you. I'm like, I don't think so, dude. I got World War II resistance fighters. I don't really measure up. So it's been a struggle. And finally, with this book, with Running with Sherman, I felt that there was no other way to tell the story than other than through my eyes. So mm-hmm. It was both the natural way to tell the story and an adjustment I've been trying to make now for the past 10 years.
I feel like the editor is just like, oh, you need more personal stuff in it. You're like, hold my beer. This one's gonna be good.
That's right. You want personal, brother? I'm gonna talk to you about personally sticking my hand inside of a donkey's penis. That's how far I'm willing to go.
Exactly. I read that. I was like, oh boy, we're going there. It's going everywhere. Yeah. I mean, it's also, I'm gonna say, like, a really personal book in terms of the other characters too. It's not just. I mean, not to say that it doesn't get personal in Natural Born Heroes or in Born to Run, but this one I feel like really gets into some darker topics and, like, more serious topics that, you could have kind of backed away from and you didn't.
Yeah, it's funny about that, because I think that one of the sociopathic problems of being a writer is that you really do forget about other people's feelings while you're writing about them. And, when I was doing Born to Run, I originally had this epilogue, this extra chapter I tacked on to the end of the book. And I decided not to actually use it, but not out of any kind of compassion or, higher human feeling, which should have been my impulse, but because it felt extraneous. It just felt extra. I think where Born to Run ends is where it should end. It's sort of drop curtain. But mm-hmm. between the end of that race, end of the book, and 2 years later when it was ready to be published, so much had changed in the lives of the people that I was writing about. Mm-hmm. So it was this epilogue with all the drama in their lives. And my editor's like, that's too much, dude. It's like it's becoming a soap opera. But later on, I was talking to Scott Jorg about that, and Scott was talking about some of the hard times he'd gone through in his own life. And I said, oh yeah, that was in my epilogue. It looked like, dude, you were going to write that about me? I said, absolutely I was. But it never dawned on me that he might actually have some personal thoughts about that. But my feeling is that without even thinking about it, your obligation is only to the story. Like, you're just putting in everything that you know. And so for Running with Sherman, it was the same way. It never really clicked in my head that this is highly personal stuff and I should be sensitive about it. My guiding principle is, you're fighting to get the best story you can, and you don't really think twice about until you're done whether anyone's going to have any objections to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that makes this story much better. Like, if I kind of think about this new book and taking out all of the parts that are highly personal, I mean, you'd be left with, like, a really nice children's book about donkey running.
Yeah.
But that's definitely, the really meaty parts are, more of the human struggles. Well, and also the donkey struggles, I guess.
But no, I'm hoping that's the thing that will keep me doing books that people like, is that I gotta say, in a lot of adventure and outdoor writing, it always feels a little sanitized. Like it always feels like the writers come in with this conception in their mind, like they're going to be telling a heroic tale of their struggle against adversity, and the human stuff like, yeah, well, dude, you got a boyfriend, or where'd you have dinner last night, or during the Ironman, like, did you take a shit and where? So
yeah,
like the personal stuff that people want to know and that relates to their own lives is always like sanitized out. So I feel like if you can take one step closer to real life, you'll have a stronger book.
Yeah, for sure. You can tell, in those books, you can take like a page or two describing like popping a blister, but yeah, talking about like poop or your romantic life seems to be like that's over the line.
Yeah. I can sort of see why. There becomes this cycle of a kind of story, and that same cycle just gets repeated over and over. So it's kind of like sports movies. Like the majority of sports movies below, they're terrible because it's the same movie. It's just like, the underdog, and he tried and he failed, but then he succeeded. Yay! And anything that's more human or real. That's why, like, every once in a while, a movie like White Men Can't Jump, it's like leaps off the screen because it's really human. Like, it's on a personal level. The guy's kind of a loser. He kind of remains a loser. He has one shining moment. That's why Rocky, I thought, was so amazing too.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a complete loser. He never actually was a winner, in the first Rocky. And so I think those kind of things where we actually show that the hero is not a saint. He's just a normal person and has an occasional upblip, but the rest of his life his or her life is still kind of gritty.
Yeah, we were having a conversation about this recently, just in the background of sort of social media and stuff, and people not, sharing purposefully or just because that's not the norm. The hard days, or the, I got up today to go train and it was pouring rain, and I, like you say, there was some sort of pooping issue. You don't hear about those, and so we all have this like false sense that, you just win automatically. These people are just amazing and have no flaws. I mean, I'm sorry, Peter. I was just going to say, and that I think with Rocky or something like that, right, is maybe something that's gotten closer to that. Like, yeah, it sucked, and he was poor, and living basically on the streets, like
drinking raw eggs.
Yeah, he couldn't even cook his eggs. That's how poor he was.
Rough day.
right. He could not even apply heat to his food source.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And I know what I love, and actually, it's kind of a whole side issue, but. There's this ongoing conversation and effort to turn Born to Run into a film. And in the conversations I've had with the screenwriters and the producers, I've always pointed out that the best sports movies are about goals that people set for themselves. Like the sports films I really like are never about like winning the NHL championship. No, it's a dude saying, well, all I really want to do is this. Like the hero sets his or her own personal goal, and it's not like a championship. It's not really winning anything. Like for Rocky, it was just like, I just want to be not dead. If I can just be alive at the end of the fight, that's a win. That's a win for me. With White Men Can't Jump, the dude just wanted to dunk a ball. Like that was it. If I can just dunk, that's a win. And so I heard this quote. I'm going to try and track it down to earth, but someone said, the best races always start with a line drawn with your shoe in the dirt. And
I love that.
I like that. It's like not the Boston Marathon. It's you and your Jaboni buddies on a Saturday morning. I tell you what, let's just see who can get to the Wawa, over in Avondale quickest on our bikes, and that's it. So anyway, that's what I think I'd like is if we could just distill it down to, hey man, I'm not superhuman. I'm just a normal person, and if it's raining out, you know what? I'm not going to run. But on the days I do, it'll be glorious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then to kind of come back to the new book and sort of talking about that running in the rain or training when it kind of sucks. Yeah, I feel like in the book, training versus playing seems to be this really common thread. And embracing this idea of play. Did the donkeys help you get to that point? I know you talk about a few ultra runners who have that, and that's, changed their careers. But for you, was it the donkeys?
It's funny that mentality has become almost an obsession with me. And I'm really curious whether I'm on to something universal or it's just personal. Like, I'm not, it's like when you feel like you've got something figured out, but you're not sure if it's shared by the broader world and is like an objective truth, or it's just my own personal preference that I care to project outward. So I'm curious to see how this mentality plays out, because I'm going to keep exploring it. But my thinking is just that, the hardest workouts you'll ever have in your life will probably be in fourth grade, like on the playground for free all, or sharks and minnows. Like, I never ran harder in my life than JV basketball in seventh grade, because it was play, it was fun, and we somehow taken fun and turned it into work. And I think that anything that is work, you tend to avoid and kind of dread and don't really put your heart into it. And what I found is that as much as you can put the playfulness back in and forget about performance goals, the better off you are. And with the donkeys, like, for sure, because you're not in control. When you're out with the donkey, you're hanging on. You're not really running the operation. And if the donkeys aren't in the mood, they'll just shut it down, man. Like, no, we're not having it today. Or if there's a pace I want to run and they don't, guess who's winning that fight? So what I like about it is that it just becomes this thing where you have to adjust and go with the flow and and make it adaptable and changeable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult thing. I'm a coach and that's what I do. So it's trying to find that balance, right? People have goals, but then not, we all started, just riding bikes or running or whatever for fun, probably, right? There was probably a social element. And so trying not to
maybe you did. I didn't.
I guess, why did you start?
Because I gained weight in college.
Oh, okay. Well, and for those people, I guess those people exist too, right? Like, there's this like really hard goal, but there's not really like a why, or like, what does today look like, right? And trying to find that joy. So, maybe in the weight loss person, it's like finding that, like, yeah, you got to go run because like your dog expects you to go run too, and you enjoy, being out. And it's a tough one, right? I think you're definitely onto something as far as like, how can that play be reconciled with any sort of long-term objective, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll contradict myself in the space of like a single sentence. I'll be like, there shouldn't be goals. I go, dude, your whole book is about, every one of your books is about a goal. What are you talking about? So, I realize there's a conflict there between what I'm preaching and what I'm doing to a certain extent, and yet I feel like there's a consistency. Like, I feel like I'm not just blowing smoke. So with running with Sherman, I think maybe the best insight came from the person who coached me, Eric Horton. And, it's funny with Eric, he gets really, I think, great performance results out of me, pardon me, but it never feels forced. I never feel like pushed, and yet escalating my stamina and speed really quickly and consistently and healthfully. And, maybe, Peter, what we're looking at is this is where the coach really steps forward, because I think, one of the things I remember Eric telling me right from the get-go is that, most people do their hard runs too easy and their easy runs too hard. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the problem right there, is that if you're not really tapped in to how to maximize what your body can do, then you're always doing it. You're pushing yourself too hard or too easy, and that's where the discrepancy comes between achieving and pushing yourself. So, what Eric did was, and always does, is like, he's like, all right, let's find out where the goal is and work our way backwards. So don't start today with what you think you can do. Like, hey, I think I can run 10 miles today. Maybe you don't need to do 10 miles today. Maybe you just need to do 2 miles today. Like, find out what and where your goal is. So your goal is to run 15 miles with a donkey in Colorado in 9 months. Good. Okay, that's our end point, and let's work backwards to today. And in that case, maybe the daily workload is actually a lot lighter than people think. You know, because if they're thinking, oh shit, Boston Marathon, oh my God, it's going to be in April, I better get out today and bust my ass. So, well, you don't need to bust your ass. You know, it works up gradually and smartly as opposed to like frantically.
Yeah, and I think the other piece to that may be of assistance to you as you do think through this is, I think you know, obviously are excited about the race with the donkey. And so for you, when you backtrack that, you know, that's what we call point B, you're going to race in Colorado. Everything in between, all those little steps, you're probably excited for, so it seems like play. Like you're just going out and running with a donkey. That sounds playful. But you're excited for that, right? Whereas if I'm like, I really hate donkeys and running, actually.
He doesn't hate donkeys, in case they're listening. Peter loves donkeys.
But you know what I mean? Like, so you've chosen a goal. Like, we signed up for an Ironman, and I wanted to learn how to swim, but I hate riding in a straight line on pavement, and I really don't like running on pavement. So I dealt with it, and I learned to swim, but that would be a poor goal for me to do long term, right? It's just, but you see people sign up for things where it's like, oh, I definitely want to do an Ironman.
But they don't actually.
They don't actually want to go to a pool every day for the next years.
Because it's terrible.
So I wonder if that's part of your play, and that's the reconciling of your play versus goal. Is that the goal has to be playful in your mind, right? And that's different for each person.
Yeah, and this is maybe this is the huge tell. And I was in France a couple weeks ago for the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc, and I was having a conversation with, I don't remember who. Oh no, I do remember that. The guy I was there crewing for. So I was crewing for a guy doing UTMB, and he was having this conversation that he had read some psychological study, that something like 80% of what we do is based on what other people think. So like the kind of jobs we get, like the houses we buy, the clothes we wear, the books we read, you know, the foods that we say we like, the wines that we pay extra money for, even though I can't tell the difference, but I bought it anyway. 80% is all based on other people's opinions. And that's the problem right there. And only 20% is what you genuinely want, which of course is the specialty flavor Oreos. It's orange pumpkin spice season for Oreos. I really want this. I'm not going to get them, so I'll be embarrassed. So, think about that. So maybe that's what goes on. So the person who signs up for an Ironman that doesn't like to, run on pavement or ride a bike in a straight line, the question is, why is she doing an Ironman?
Yeah.
Maybe she should be doing a trail half marathon. Like that's going to be her joy in life.
Yeah, or for some people it might be like the distance, right? Like it seems like a lot of people sign up because Ironman is what everyone's impressed by. But
well, if you say you do triathlon, the immediate question is, oh, have you done an Ironman?
Yeah, versus like a 5K that's quite athletic and difficult, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the real downfalls of running is that if you tell anybody that you're a runner, you'll face the question, have you done a marathon?
Mm-hmm.
What time have you done a marathon? And like, person doesn't even run. Like, what do they give a shit what your time is? And they don't even know what a good time is. And what is a good time? So you're right that there is this arbitrary performance standard that enters the conversation so quickly. And instead of, to me, what's really about is the craft. Like, can you get the craft down? You tell someone that you're a painter, they're not going to say, well, did you win? Like, did you win the painting World Series? No, it's like, oh, cool. Let me see your work.
Yeah. It's funny. I pretty much only started doing the trail running or the ultra thing kind of because I wanted to like tick off that distance, and it was the first time I ever crossed a finish line where I was actually like smiling and like, oh, I enjoyed that whole thing. So I do think it takes a while to find that thing that actually feels like play and that feels like fun, right?
I agree with you, and I think Peter really sort of zeroed in on what the key is. Like, why are you doing this thing? Why have you chosen this goal? And it could be, I've chosen the goal not because I want to do it, but because I think it's going to look prestigious, and that is probably a dangerous mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, where do I want to go with this next? So another common thread in the book that I'm very excited about is the fact that this book, I think, had more women in it than any of the others. And it's not like the others didn't have women in it, but it seems like women in ultra endurance is this topic that's very near and dear to your heart. Did that happen by accident with this one, or were you looking for women for this, or how did that come about?
It was a revelation for me with Born to Run. So again, I was new to the sport. I was not a runner myself when I started researching Born to Run, and definitely wasn't a trail runner or ultra runner. So it was a real eye opener for me, coming out of a traditional sports background of coming across the sport world. Man, women kick ass. They're right up there. And that's when my eyes started opening to the fact, like, when we think about this, actually endurance sports are the only sports that dudes didn't invent. All the other sports that we watch on TV, and men invented them, we did not evolve playing hockey. We just invented hockey and baseball and basketball. And so the spectator sports were created by men for men. So it's not like men are genetically, physically superior to women. They are superior in the sports that they created for themselves, to take advantage of uniquely male characteristics. But, the human animal, again, did not evolve to hit a baseball. The human animal actually evolved to be an endurance creature. And the more we do the activities that are natural to our biological makeup as humans, the more the differences between men and women just start to diminish. And that's why, right now, who's the first person to swim across the English Channel 4 times? Well, wouldn't that be a woman, Do you know about this? It just happened like a couple days ago.
Yeah, I saw that actually. It was pretty impressive, yeah.
It's insanely impressive. So, first person to swim, uncaged from Cuba to Florida. Would that be a woman? Would that be Diana Nyad? So, that was something that I'd never read before, never heard of before. And when I came across it in Born to Run, again, it was an eye-opener. Oh, wow, it just changed my perspective. And so once you have that change of focus, you start to look for it everywhere. Like, hey, well, where else is this true? And so with Natural Born Heroes, my hands were a little bit tied because I was dealing with resistance fighters on the island of Crete during World War II. And, basically shooting shit for no good reason is pretty much a male-dominated activity.
Fair.
Although there were a lot of women.
There were some really badass women in that were just kind of casually mentioned, and I'm blanking on her actual name, but the Mouse was one of the resistance fighters. I actually just downloaded her autobiography, and amazing.
Yeah, but when it comes to warfare, it's unfortunately or any kind of like violence, it's something that dudes create, and then women are like, oh, well, I guess I got to help out solve this shit. So it's not like they're instigating it; they're kind of drawn into it against their will. And but so yeah, I mean, it was that book. But again, it's often it's possible, particularly with parkour. Again, it's an endurance, agility, adaptability exercise where, from a distance, you see two people doing parkour, you can't tell if it's a man or a woman. That they are performing at the same level. It's as often as possible. I look for those examples to make that point. But yeah, it was with Running with Sherman in particular that I felt like I found like the perfect test case that I was looking for. That, you take Barb Dolan and you put her in a burro race for 29 miles against the fastest, toughest burro racers in the world, and chances are she's going to kick the crap out of everybody, man or woman.
Well, and she's one of the older racers, and then there were some younger, like very, very young women racers who were also, it sounded like, kind of on their way up in burro racing.
And yeah, so that's the funny thing about it. So burro racing is its own creature because you're combining two challenges. One is your own physical ability, but the other thing is your communion with another creature. And it is interesting to see how young people do really well in the sport. Like this year, a 16-year-old won the Buena Vista. No, it's Fairplay. Yeah, won the Fairplay race. 16 years old, out of New Jersey. Oh. And this guy, it was Roger Pedretti's nephew. So he's the main character in the book. And I've been thinking about that. I think the reason why is because there are these two sweet spots in life where you're not a pain in the ass. Or you don't have the confidence to be a pain in the ass. It's when you're like a teenager and when you're mature. But when you hit your peak, like in your 20s and 30s, you fucking know it all, and you're noisy, and you're opinionated. But when you're a teenager showing up in like a bike race, you're kind of like backing off a little bit. Like you want to sort of see what the lay of the land is. And same thing when you're older. Like you realize you're on the back nine of your life, so you're backing off a little bit. And I think that makes you really good with animals. People aren't screaming and yelling and trying to push. They handle animals better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have to ask, did you notice any difference between female and male donkeys? Very important question.
Oh yeah. There's a huge difference, and it's actually very problematic. So there's a thing called an uncut jack. An uncut jack is a male donkey that has not been neutered, and as you can imagine, with any like teenage boy, you got a lot of testosterone running through their veins, and an uncut jack can be really strong and really fast, but hard to handle. Mm-hmm. And the thing about one donkey can fuck up everybody's race. So if you got an uncut jack in the race, it can just cause mayhem for everybody else's donkeys. So what we have here, we have two females and a male, and Sherman has been neutered, so he's a neutered dude. So he's pretty good, but really the leader of the pack is Matilda, who is a female mini, but she is like the boldest, the toughest. Like she's the boss. And anytime there's like a problem, like if there's like a creek you gotta go across, you haven't gone through it before, the other donkeys are nervous, like we just bring up Matilda, and Matilda just plows right on through.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of going away from donkeys, but coming back to the book. What I've generally loved about all of your books is there's always, this main storyline running through it, but then there's all of these little offshoots. So in, Natural Born Heroes, it's parkour, and then phenylphenone, and, fat adapted diets and stuff like that. This one has a couple of them. Was there any one aside in this one that was your favorite?
Well, there's one that was the most important, and that was dealing with mental health and depression with athletes. Mm-hmm. And, I with all the books, there's a point where I feel like I'm on to something really good. With Born to Run, I think it was looking at running shoe technology and running biomechanics. It's now been, I guess, it's been actually 10 years to the year since that book came out. So I feel like that conversation almost feels dated now. But back then, man, it was a conversation that was not taking place at all. And I think one of the reasons that Born to Run became well known is because this became like this controversy and this debate. And and podiatrists immediately came roaring out of their caves to argue that I was completely wrong, and you need orthotics. But I think it became a question that people were starting to address for the first time. Like, maybe there's something other than buying new shoes that can change the way I run. And with running with Sherman, I started to come across two things with mental health that I thought were really important. One was depression, and the other thing were people dealing with like autism or epilepsy or other setbacks that could be profoundly improved by some kind of communication with animals. Mm-hmm. And so in both cases, with Born to Run, with the running shoes, I was really new to this conversation, and I was like, man, I'm not sure. I might be in over my head here, because no one else was talking about this question about the bullshit that the running shoe manufacturers were spewing in the market. The whole idea of like change your shoes every 300 miles. That was just gospel, man. That was just a law of nature.
Yeah. And
I wasn't seeing a challenge anywhere. And then I thought, no, it's just completely make believe. It's make believe marketing. But even as I'm writing them, I think I'm right, but I'm not sure I'm right. And with mental health and animals, I felt the same bit of apprehension. Like, I'm seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence that this is really important, but there isn't a lot of hard science to back it up. And so I think that's why I felt both excited, like this is really good, and at the same time a little bit of like, okay, I'm at the edge of what I can really state scientifically here. But we know what happened was there were two things. That one was looking at the prevalence of acute clinical depression among high-performing athletes, because again, we're always told sort of the opposite, that exercise is an antidote for depression, and yet all of a sudden you see like Michael Phelps, and you guys don't know this, but I spent a lot of time in my room thinking about killing myself. Like you don't hear that on ABC Why We're All the Sports. And then they started to do studies of elite distance swimmers, high performing swimmers, and the depression rate is so shockingly high. And so that's where I felt like I was on to something that needed a closer look.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had not a sports psychologist, a clinical psychologist on talking about that, because I feel like so many, exercise is the antidote for depression is kind of this common refrain, but what if exercise is part of what's causing yours because you're at that level where you're, training so much, whether you're elite or you're just, a regular person, but you're maybe overtrained. Like there's a tipping point there.
There is, and that's something that I think, just like the word depression, we start to deal with these terms that are so fuzzy and hard to understand. And I think, one of the most aggravating things with depression is the fact that it's called depression. Because like, you're kind of sad. Oh, you're depressed. No, dude, I have a mental illness. I have a serious chemical imbalance which can kill me. It's like a cancer of the brain. And so, but unfortunately, because it has this everyday term, I don't think people look at it as the serious disease that it really is. And same with exercise. Exercise can mean, hey, 20 minutes of jumping rope versus like 2 hours of anaerobic threshold swimming. And those are two very different activities, and they have very different effects.
And so I think we talked about this a bit when you were on last time too, as you were just sort of working through the book and the adventures with the donkeys, but you found certainly the exercising and playing with animals then is sort of helpful.
Here's the thing I was getting at. Again, it was one of these things that should have been obvious to me, but it took this jarring experience to actually make me see it. So, I think one of the difficulties in life is that, like, whatever we're doing today in 2019, you kind of assume that everybody's been doing everywhere throughout time. That our experience is kind of universal, dating around the world and back 2,000 years, but it's not. What we're doing today is very particular to the moment. And, I think I had lost sight of the fact that what we're doing in regards to our community with animals is very, very different than what humans have done for most of existence. For, hundreds of thousands of years, we were always within a few feet of animals all the time. We relied on them for transportation, for security, for our food. Your food was local, so you got your dairy from the farmer next door, or you had your own Jersey cow, or you had your own goats, and everybody had a dog, and you understood your dog. And so animals are all around us all the time. And then relatively recently, like within the past, 100, 150 years, we very abruptly severed that relationship and stepped away. And whenever you do that, when you change course on evolutionary history, there are going to be consequences to pay. And I feel like we are feeling the consequences now, but we don't know why. So when you have therapy animals and security creatures, and when you bring like cats into a cancer ward, and suddenly people's health dramatically improves, there's some chemical reaction in our bodies that is hardwired from contact with animals that you can measure and see, but we've kind of have forgotten about and don't pay enough attention to.
It's true. I was at the bank yesterday depositing a check, and the one teller walked in with a 1-month-old or 2-month-old Australian Shepherd puppy. And as she was processing my check, she just handed me the puppy. And I was like, honestly, you could tell me that my bank account had been drained, and I would be totally okay with it right now. It was
isn't it
amazing.
Crazy? Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Like, a dog enters the room, and suddenly every head turns. Like everybody wants to check out the dog and pet the dog, and it's funny because when you see therapy animals, they have to wear like bibs to say, "Please don't pet me," because the big liability is, there's a dog. Everybody wants to put their hands on it. So, you say, what's the solution? I don't really know. It's I don't want to be in a position of advocating like, okay, you're all wrong. You all need a dog today because that.
Could you please be in that position? Could you just state that one for the record?
I'm pushing more toward goats and donkeys, Molly. I hear you, but I think you're one step away from your true destiny. So, but there's something there. There's something there that I think we feel like we have to steamroll ahead in our lives and say, well, I don't have time to walk a dog. I have an apartment. I don't really walk a dog. Yeah, there's lots of reasons why you feel like you can't do certain things, and that's cool. But you got to be aware that there can be consequences to pay. And so the person who says, "I'm going to do an Ironman," okay, you're going to smash through, even though you hate swimming and you don't really like to ride the bike. You're going to smash through and do it, but there's going to be consequences. You're going to end up either getting injured or being disheartened, or doing a one and done and never doing it again. And I think the same thing too is if we hardwire our lives so there's no room for the outside world, you're going to pay a price for it.
Do you think, I don't want to go too far down this, but it's interesting, I think, because I think also endurance athletes probably self-select themselves to be isolated, right? And then it's sort of thinking, oh, no, I'm not big on teams. I'm maybe introverted, which Molly and I both sort of cling to that title. But, I think sometimes we set ourselves up to be sort of isolated and maybe, I don't want to say predisposed to some of these mental conditions, but...
we're creating a good ground for them, though.
Yeah, and just, everyone's taking things so seriously, and it's like, well, you can't go out, and run with someone or walk with someone or, person or animal, I guess, but...
Because it's not in your training plan.
Yeah, and we're individual endurance athletes, right? Why would you go out with someone?
It's funny, I wrestle with that myself because I preach it and I believe it, and yet I don't do it. I'll match you head to head for introversion. I'll see and raise you, because I'm in the middle of nowhere, and there are periods like when I'm working on a book and my family's away, where I'm literally the only person I'll talk to for a week is the mailman. So Lauren pulls over the package. And, hey, Lauren, how you doing? Good, man. How's it? Good. Bye. And that's the only human contact I'll have for an entire week or more. And I'm perfectly fine with that. So I can't explain it. I feel like, I guess I'm bringing this down with search for rationalization. I feel that the communal aspect, the cooperative aspect is crucial. Yeah, in personal daily life, I don't really practice it myself.
Well, you have donkeys, so...
Yeah, there's something to that. And maybe that's my substitute is having... The thing about it is, when you do it animals, if you're doing it right, then you got to pay a lot of attention. With the donkeys, I got to keep an eye on their hooves and have their hooves trimmed every couple of months and check their teeth and their food, their water, and their temperament. If they're acting funky, something's going on, and you got to figure out what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if just as we're finishing off here, I wonder if someone were interested in burro racing. We do sort of on this podcast often look at different sports. So if someone's sort of interest is piqued by this podcast or by reading your book, is there how do you even start into burro racing? Is there a rental thing? Molly said she was going to rent a donkey. I don't know that that's a thing. What would someone do, especially if they're not in Colorado where these races are happening?
You can rent anything.
We're actually completely right. By the way, at this moment, I don't know what, maybe because the sun's shifting, but all of the animals, every single animal we have is now in front of me. I feel like Aquaman or something. I thought the Beastmaster said I got 6 geese to the right, 2 goats in front of me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 sheep in front of me, and the 3 donkeys. All this, and one of the cats. One of the cats is sort of walking around.
Really captive audience here.
I'm Mussolini up here on my balcony. So, very serious question. Yeah, you totally can rent donkeys. So there's a family that I read about in the book, the Wan family, whose son Ben is epileptic, and they're a suburban Denver family, not country at all. But they heard about equine therapy had helped epileptics, and they found Curtis Emery, who's this donkey trainer, and they had this magnificent experience with Curtis, and they became a hardcore burro family. They've been that way for I don't know how many years now, more than 10 years. And they actually facilitate a lot of burro rentals. They're friends with a burro raiser. He's got a farm with a couple dozen donkeys on it, and the Wands are the go-to. And actually, a lot of the elite burro racers are guys who live up in Boulder, men and women who live in Boulder, and they don't have their own donkeys at all, but they're partners with the Wands. So Justin Mock and George Zach will show up at a race, and then the Wands will show up at a trailer and lead 2 donkeys out and hand them over. And they'll race with donkeys and hand it back to the Wands and never see them again. So there's a now growing population of rental burros out there available in Colorado. That said, if you can in any way navigate your way to owning your own, it's so much better, because then you learn so much from working with the same animal. You can't even articulate it. Now, when people come out and they want to run with their donkeys, I kind of look at them like, you see all the mistakes they're making, and you think it's so obvious. Like, why would you be on the right side? Are you crazy? Things that, of course, I didn't know myself at all when I started, now just seem like common knowledge.
In your, just to keep on the training sort of perspective here, what would look, if you did own your own donkey, are you running them 5K a day? Are you doing, I know you really like strides. Are you doing sort of strides with the donkeys? What is a training day for the donkey, or as a team, what would that look like?
That was what was so much fun about this, and still is so much fun about it. I think, I'm trying to figure out what was actually the driving force. So one thing about the donkeys, the big breakthrough, is that no donkey wants to run by itself. They always want to be in a group. And it can be donkey or human group, but they want to be in a herd. And I'm looking at these 3 big dogs right now. They're standing at the gate. The entire time we've been talking, they're staring at the gate like, let's go, dude. It's time to go. But, so what happened, Peter, was that so what we did was we quickly escalated from 1 donkey to 3. And that's what made the difference for Sherman, was having 2 other donkeys with him. And so 3 donkeys means 3 people. So my wife started to run, and then our friend Zeke. So now there's 6 of us. But what we really found was when someone else, either one of our daughters or anybody else, was out in front going point, then the donkeys were way better. So they have a herd and then someone alpha that they can follow. So we always recruit anybody, my daughter on a bike or a neighbor who wanted to go for a jog. So if our entire team was 7, 3 donkeys, 3 people plus a point person, that was the dream scenario. And then we just sort of adapted within that. So if we had 7, then we knew we were going to have a good day. We could do some good miles, and we could also go fast. So so if there's my daughter on a bike, she can ride faster than we can run. And so we decided, okay, today's the day we really blaze it out, and let's just see if we can do a good fast 7 miles as quick as we can. If that wasn't the case, then we just kind of said, well, what haven't we done lately? Hey, we haven't done hills lately. Let's do some hills. We haven't been in the water lately. Let's take them in the creek. And so the thing was just to throw the variety at them, because the more they're interested, the better they're going to go. And so that basically became the driving factor. We had a goal in mind, 9 months out, but within that goal, as much as we could change the variety and take advantage of what was presenting itself, that's the way we went.
Mm-hmm. So we need 2 donkeys, is what I'm hearing, and a goat, and a dog.
To be honest, from what you guys are describing yourselves, I don't be too preachy. I think it'd be perfect. I think actually you guys running with donkeys and getting into burro racing, honestly, I think you guys have had so much fun.
I think we would too.
Totally would. And the other thing about it, what you would love, is the community of burro racers it's kind of like, there's that heyday when a sport is new. So remember when mountain biking was just a bunch of ding-dongs in Crested Butte that were trying to ride to Aspen? it was that unknown backwoodsy aspect that made it like super cool and fun, before it became like, super technical and on television. And same with CrossFit. When CrossFit was just, a bunch of people in a parking lot doing it together. And so right now, burro racing is in that early, like, Kona stage of Ironman. It was just a couple of guys trying to see if they could do it. So what's cool about burro racing is the community is invisible and yet so cohesive. So I think you guys would just dig it. You'd be out with a bunch of weirdos with donkeys in the mountains having fun.
I guess we could create Team Canada and start making it international.
Ooh, yeah, there we go.
I think you're honest. I think it has not crossed international borders yet. So you could be breaking new ground.
I wonder if we could get more like Yukon donkeys, but then they probably wouldn't do well in Colorado in heat.
Well, I guess it is in August. So, yeah.
Anyway,
I honestly don't know about that, because the thing about donkeys is they are desert creatures. So I think they're way more adaptable than you may think. Well, now you guys kind of got me onto this. That'd be terrific for you guys for next summer. If you guys wanted to do it, do you ever have a chance to spend a good period in Colorado?
We've actually, it's funny, I was literally just talking to someone else on a podcast yesterday. My coach lives out in Colorado, and I keep threatening to come out and visit him. So that might just have to be on the schedule. I don't know how he's going to feel about me adding burros to the situation, but we'll figure it out.
You totally could. You totally could. If you were there, and you could pick it up quickly. If you were anywhere around, like Denver, that's where the wands are. They could take you out a couple times. They show you the ropes, and you could jump into racing real quick.
I don't know.
I think another reason that Colorado makes sense, I guess, for a while at least.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, tell everyone about the new book, what it's called, where to find it, and it's out on October 15th, right?
Yeah. So it's Running with Sherman. By the way, my neighbor's tractor's going by. Oh, this is a pure country scene, and his dog is running in front of him. He's driving the tractor.
Yeah.
It's cool.
If you're ever selling this farm, just let us know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, it is pretty ideal. He's got this faded old orange tractor. This is something right out of like a 1950s movie. So, Running with Sherman. It's coming out October 15th, and I am going to be touring everywhere. Really went berserker on the schedule. So it's something like 50 different events in 40 different cities.
Oh, wow. Where can everyone find that schedule?
It is online on chrismcdougall.com, and I'm trying to, cut my teeth on Instagram as well, so I'll be trying to blast it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting. As always, it's super fun catching up with you and hearing about all of your adventures and getting me excited about getting different animals, wide variety. Need like a starter pack.
Listen, Molly, if you want to pursue this conversation, I'll lay in your front against Peter, and we'll try and wear him down.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start a petition with all of the podcast guests we've had on.
Well, they have quite a list of Olympians and successful people, so thank you for joining that and returning to the podcast, Chris, and for keeping that campaign alive. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Consummate Athlete podcast. You can check out my stuff over at theoutdooredit.com or by following me on Instagram and Twitter at Molly J. Herford. And you can check out Peter's coaching, training plans, blogs, all that fun stuff over at smartathlete.ca or by following him on Twitter and Instagram at Peter Glassford. And if you want to support this show and other awesome podcasts, please check out wideanglepodium.com for show info, other podcasts, bonus content, and to become a donating member so you can get all of that rad behind the scenes content and help keep shows like this on the air. And lastly, if you're enjoying this podcast and all the information that we're bringing to you every single week, do us a solid and pop into iTunes to leave us a rating and review. It takes you about 2 seconds. You can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone, and it really helps us out. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week.